Alright, before I start my review of the latest South Park game, check out this little clip from my Stick of Truth review I did back in 2014. Why didn't Jimbo and Ned get a summon, for example? They could have been like, it's coming right for us, and then they'd annihilate all enemies with a ridiculous amount of gunfire and then just claim it was all self-defense. Cut to today's game.
It's coming right for us.
Called it! I mean, did Matt and Trish see my review or something? That's crazy. Probably a coincidence, but just allow me this moment of sweet obliviousness. Alright, let's begin. So video games based on TV shows are a rarity, and whenever one does come around, it's more than likely gonna be shit. And prior to 2014, South Park was not an exception. Like many other IPs, it just couldn't find much ground in the land of interactive entertainment. Which is why the Stick of Truth was such a pleasant surprise. Still, to this day, it's one of the greatest ever IP-based video games out there, as it captured the look and feel of the show to perfection, and it was just a fun RPG in its own right. I gave it a 9 out of 10, and I didn't ever at all expect a sequel. And then one was announced, and I was like, yeah, bitch! But granted, one or two things did sour my expectations. Like with how Ubisoft San Francisco were gonna develop it. Behold their entire development history!
What the fuck?
Oh, and it being Ubisoft, of course it's gonna implement pre-orders and season passes. Which is beyond ironic, as South Park itself has made fun of this.
Pre-order doesn't mean shit, okay? When you pre-order a game, you're just committing to paying for something that some assholes in California haven't even finished working on yet. You know what you get for pre-ordering a game? A big dick in your mouth.
Pre-order now for Towley bonus content.
Do you not see the hypocrisy here?
But that aside, I'm pleased to report I had a blast with the fractured butthole. Okay, I am convinced Matt and Trey called it that just so they could giggle when critics and PR guys say the title. Anyway, let's begin my review of The Fractured Butthole. Last time I'm saying it. Number 1. Thunderpants, the game. So, much like the last game, the story revolves around a make-believe war the kids of South Park are waging. Except this time the theme is superheroes. You again take the role of the new kid, as with the help of Cartman, Stan, Kyle, Kenny, Butters, and Morgan Freeman, you slowly discover your part in this tale, for you have a weapon. Powerful ability that will turn the tide of the war. And that weapon is your asshole.
It's disgusting.
Now, I don't want to spoil a lot about the plot, but rest assured, it's South Park. It is vile, it is unbelievably distasteful, it is brilliant. Now, I wouldn't say the humour is as strong as it was in the Stick of Truth, but I undoubtedly had a big dumb smile on my face throughout. Superheroes are just the perfect thing to make fun of right now, and holy shit, Matt and Trey have just so much fun with it here. I loved how they made Jimmy a speedster, I loved Timmy as Dr. Xavier, and I just loved how the kids seem to be more obsessed with creating their own cinematic universe than actually just having fun playing superheroes. I mean, that is just a perfect analogy of Marvel and DC right now. I also loved how more minor South Park characters got time to shine. Like Scott Malkinson I thought was fun, and whenever Kyle's cousin shows up, he steals the show. He was my personal favourite character here.
As you can see, he is the one running around giving the humankind a bad name. He was sent here to destroy me and weaken my powers.
No, I came to spend 2 weeks with my cousin and wanted to play superheroes. And then he said, okay, what superhero do you want to be? And I said, I want to be Humankind. But he said, you can't be Humankind. I'm Humankind. And I said, well, why can't we be Humankinds together? So I went to Aunt Sheila and I said, I want to be Humankinds together. And she told him he had to do what I said because I was the guest.
Why can't we be humankind together? I love him. Anyway, with that being said, do not go into this game expecting nuanced and expertly crafted comedy. I mean, the kid you play as I describe as nothing but a walking fart joke. But if you love the show, you'll love the game. And please, if you aren't caught up with the show, hold out on picking this one up. Otherwise you'll end up confused as hell by many of the running gags. Remember when Suspect used to upload my movie reviews? Oh yes, I remember. Now, the humour and plot are good, but not representative of South Park's absolute best. For example, there's one or two running gags that I felt got worn a little thin. Like, they do this thing across the game where they have you fill out all this information regarding your gender, religion, and sexual orientation, and it all had zero effect on gameplay. So obviously it was intended to be funny, I just didn't get the joke. I really don't know what they were going for there. Speaking of stretched out jokes, some are helped by how a lot of in-game dialogue is repeated. Like when you encounter Wendy, her superhero shtick is that she uses smartphones to disrupt and attack enemies. And her superhero mantle? Call girl. Yeah, that's pretty funny. But every time you attack with her in battle, the game uses this same gag over and over. It got old. Also, they do go a bit overboard with the fart jokes. Yeah, I know that's rich coming from me, and I know that's a little odd to criticize South Park for, but even by the show standards, it's a bit much. For example, every toilet you come across has a mini game where you gotta lose about half a pound. And it's kind of funny using your analog stick to simulate squeezing out a turd, but after the 20th time you do this, no. Oh, and then there's the ending of the game, which is really abrupt. I mean, I realize that this is kind of in line with South Park's usual format. The TV episodes usually end pretty abruptly too, but that makes sense in 20-minute long TV episodes. In a 30-hour long game, yeah, more closure would have been nice. But whilst I'm on the subject of game length, I gotta give Ubisoft props. One of my complaints against the Stick of Truth was just how short it was. Here, the game is almost twice as long. That's very nice to see. This really suits this type of game a lot more. Though honestly, I would have liked it if the game was even longer, as most RPGs go beyond the 50-hour mark. But 30 hours is still acceptable, and me wanting a product to be longer is great proof of how much I enjoyed it. But a longer campaign length would benefit the game in another way, as there's not much of a replayability factor here. Yeah, I doubt I'll be playing again. Now, not every game has to have replayability, but I was kind of expecting this game to have it. Let me explain. You see, a large portion of the game revolves around the war between Coon and Friends and the Freedom Pals, and one mission has you going undercover as a Coon and Friends member to spy on the opposing team. And I was kind of expecting the game to give me a choice as to which faction I wanted to join. I thought I might have to choose to side with either Cartman or Timmy's group, and this would have offered different missions, cutscenes, and teammate abilities depending on who I went with. But they don't do this, which I thought was a bit of a missed opportunity. And this is especially disappointing considering that the game's promo material advertises this feature, with many other trailers containing the tagline, "Choose a side." Yeah, these trailers are lying to you. You stay loyal to Cartman whether you like it or not. I mean, come on Ubisoft, advertising a game feature that isn't even in the game? What is this, No Man's Sky? Oh, but to shift immediately to a big pro of this title, there's no censoring found in any regional version of the game this time around. Yeah, this is very welcome considering the whole fiasco with Stick of Truth. But there are still some moments that made me go, I would not be brave enough to write that. Like, if you've played the game, you'll remember the lap dance bit. Yeah, I cannot believe they got away with that. So yeah, all in all, South Park fans will dig the characters and humour. And whilst the Stick of Truth was a little stronger in this regard, I didn't come out disappointed at all. So let's move on to gameplay. Number 2, South Park Chess. Now the thing that differentiates this game most from the Stick of Truth is the combat. It's still turn-based, but now you can move around on a grid, and each move available to you will affect certain areas on the grid. Cartman, for instance, has an attack that will strike the grid directly in front of him. Stan has one that will affect foes either side of him, and Wendy has one that can affect a grid spot from afar. So it's taking cues from a lot of strategy titles, and whilst it's not nearly as in-depth as a lot of those games, it serves South Park well. It's fun experimenting with different movesets and ally setups, and the move animations are a lot of fun. Like seeing Jimmy imitate the Flash as he runs down real-world stock footage. That made me laugh my ass off first time I saw it. And whilst the battle system I did like, and please remember I said that because I'm going to get pretty negative here, yeah, the combat has a lot of issues. First off, the combat is a little on the slow side. A lot of battles take around 5 or more minutes to complete, and these are just the regular enemies on the field. As a result, it does ruin the game's momentum quite a bit. It's not terrible, but regular battles I felt should have been a bit shorter. The button prompts are also not nearly as satisfying as they were in the Stick of Truth. You either gotta hit a button at the right time or mash a button quickly, but it's never made clear if your hit is critical or not. Also, the button inputs were far more varied and creative in the Stick of Truth, like how Butter's hammer had you rotate the analog stick, or how Jimmy's loot attack had you do that little rhythm minigame. Yeah, there's nothing like that anymore, which I thought was a bit of a missed opportunity. I mean, they should have built on this feature, not stripped it back. The combat is also not as in-depth as I wanted, and a lot of you guys might disagree, but I didn't find much in the game that shook up my strategy. Here's what I always did. I emphasized moves that inflicted status conditions like bleeding and shock. I did as much damage as I could using knockback when possible, and healed with items whenever I needed to. This worked best for every single enemy. What could have shaken things up more is if enemies had Pokemon-esque weaknesses and strengths. Have Kenny, for example, weak to 6th graders, but strong against ninjas, and that could force you to think more about where to place each character and who to take into battle. Could have added a lot here, I think. Now, summons make a return, and in the Stick of Truth, they were fun, but seriously flawed. You see, I didn't like how A, they couldn't be used in boss fights, 2, they were just essential win buttons, and D, you had to go back to the respective NPC to use it again. Thankfully, all the above have been fixed. But now there's other issues with them. A, there's only 4 summons in the whole game. 2, they're limited use, so you feel really guilty every time you use one. And D, they're actually underpowered this time. Yeah, Moses I found was the only useful one as he nets you all your health back. But the other 3 only do slightly more damage than your usual attacks. Come on guys, 3rd time's the charm regarding the summons, get it right if and when the 3rd South Park RPG is released. Now back to game strategy. Or rather, the lack of it. Yeah, there's not much of it in battle, and there's even less outside of it. Character customization, for instance, is practically non-existent. There's no weapons in the game, and the numerous outfits you find are purely aesthetic, yet they don't affect your stats at all. Now, I'm kinda split on this. For one, it is kinda nice to be able to customize the look of your character without having to worry about the stat boosts associated with it. Cause often in video games, equipping all the best armor can make you look like an idiot. I was gonna do a little skit to illustrate this, but ProZD beat me to it. But this does make collecting all these outfits feel kinda pointless. I've seen many people saying that they've played through the whole game without ever changing their outfit, because there really is no point. So this is either a pro or a con, depending on the kind of gamer you are. Now the only kind of stat customization you'll find here are through artifacts. Now these are various objects you'll find in South Park, and by equipping them, you'll gain boosts to things like health and attack strength. But I never felt much inclination to experiment with them. You see, each artifact has a number associated with it, that being their level of might. But I always just took this number to heart and equipped all the highest leveled artifacts I had. I mean, I could equip a lower leveled artifact to boost knockback damage, for example, but other stats will take a hit if I do that. So I was like, whatever, I'm not noticing any notable improvement anyway. I'll just equip the strongest artifacts I have and leave it at that. So combining that with no weapon or armor customization, there's very little in the way of player experimentation or power progression here. And I don't know about you, but that's 2 huge draws of RPGs out the window. I mean, there are job classes a la Final Fantasy, but none of these classes level up either. I mean, you do unlock more classes as the game progresses, and I guess these later classes feel a little stronger, but not really. It would have been cool if each class leveled up, that way you could unlock more powerful moves. Changing classes of your fellow South Park teammates would have been really fun to experiment with too, and maybe this could have changed their look and dialogue possibilities. Like you could make Token a speedster or Craig a martial artist. I hope to see something like this if the game gets a sequel, because this would be so fun to play around with. Look, the point I'm trying to make here is that the game's RPG elements are quite light and not all that rewarding, and the combat, whilst fun, I think is a step down from the Stick of Truth. Now, if you're a casual gamer and aren't too fussed about getting a complex RPG system that's really in-depth and rewarding, then you likely will care about this. But for the more hardcore gamer, looking for an RPG with a lot of substance and strategy, you might feel a bit unfulfilled. Again, not saying the combat and RPG system is bad, I never found it intrusive or annoying or anything, it's just that it could have been a lot better. Anyway, let's discuss what you do outside of combat. Number 3. Come on down to South Park. Have yourself a time. So, much like the Stick of Truth, South Park is your free-roaming playground, and it's a hell of a recreation of the town. Outside of various NPCs repeating the same dialogue every time you walk by them. I get it, little girls, South Park needs more female heroes, please shut up. Anyway, it's still amazing how this looks exactly like the show. It's a world chock-a-block with references to the episodes you've seen, and 99% of the South Park cast show up in some manner, where you can talk with them, take a selfie, and fart in their general vicinity if you so desire. But I can't praise the game too heavily for this, as it relies very heavily on the framework built in the Stick of Truth. The map, for instance, is about 90% identical. Now, I wasn't expecting the game to have another setting. I mean, what sense would it make to have a South Park game not set in South Park? But there could have been some more expansion. Like the Whole Foods store isn't here, the mall is closed, Canada you can no longer explore. I mean, 1 or 2 things have been added, but there really should have been a lot more. In fact, if it wasn't for the combat system being different, I'd likely confuse this as less a new game, but more a simple downloadable expansion for Stick of Truth. Now, there's many a collectible to find in South Park, like member berries and yaoi art of Tweak and Craig. Now, if you saw my Shadow of War review, you'll know I'm not big on collectibles in video games. But here, I didn't mind them, mostly because you run into all of them unintentionally as you're exploring, so you're rarely going out of your way to collect them. With that being said, exploring can get a little stale sometimes, and mostly when you're exploring houses, as they all look the same. I mean, walking into an empty bedroom to open a few drawers to pick up some items and then leave to do the same thing in another room. I mean, come on Ubisoft, if there's nothing interesting to find in a room, then why have the room in the first place? Like, maybe when you enter an empty room, someone like Hartman could chime in and give some backstory to the place, or maybe there could be a hidden enemy to fight. It's just that this stint of me going in and out of houses to pick up items and repeating that same toilet minigame over and over is what I spent about the first hour of this game doing. Wasn't the greatest first impression, let me tell you. Now, regarding exploration, there's a Zelda-like feature here, where as the game progresses, you unlock abilities that will unlock additional paths and routes. And of course, all these abilities all have to do with your flatulent talent.
Wow, your ass is full of surprises.
And it's pretty funny at first. I mean, the sound effect that plays when Stan sticks the pipe up your ass is oddly satisfying. Don't judge me. But it's a shame that these aren't used in more creative ways. Like, there's sometimes some light puzzles to solve, but constantly having to redo these button prompt stints gets a little old, especially when you have to do them in quick succession. Just having these entire sections of the game that have you going from point A to point B and pressing A a bunch of times. The game needed some better puzzles. I mean, the only ones that get even remotely interesting are ones where you gotta rewind time at the right moment, but they're always incredibly easy to solve. I mean, come on Ubisoft, it's an 18 rated game, right? Give us adults something of a challenge. Anyway, let's move on. Number 4. Who needs QA testers anyway? So something I always do when reviewing a new game is look at Steam reviews. Because I mostly game on console and I always want to see how the PC version compares. And one recurring theme I found is that this game is pretty buggy, and I myself have been experiencing said bugs on Xbox One. Characters' lips go off sync, cutscenes end abruptly, the game crashed on me once, one time the screen went black and I had to move around blind to find the door so the game could reload a new area. And take into account I played this about 2 months after release. Now, I fortunately didn't run into any game-breaking bugs, but I've seen a few comments from people that have. So, before buying this game, I'd advise you to see how the game is performing at your time of purchase. And to be on the safe side, be sure to save regularly using several save slots. Releasing a game as buggy as this is pretty shitty, Ubisoft, and you seem to be making that a bit of a recurring habit.
Don't let your kids watch it!
Anyway, that's a point knocked off my score of this game for sure. But bugs aside, there's also normal performance issues. One fight I got into had horrendous slowdown. It was seriously like I was playing in slow motion. I don't even get it. How does a game that's made up of nothing but 2D sprites perform this bad? Now, when the game does work, it really does look good. Well, about as good as South Park can look. It truly amazes me how I can walk down exact recreations of the show's world, but again, this is more a praise of Stick of Truth. Though the music is surprisingly good. Many epic themes are played, which honestly wouldn't sound out of place in a game that took itself more seriously. This adds to the superhero facade that these kids of South Park are putting on, and it really adds to the game's overall presentation, so nice job there. So that's just about everything covered. How would I sum this game up? Well, I definitely enjoyed it. The South Park cast and humour continues to shine, and for me, that's all I really needed from this game. But if I were to distance myself and look at this game critically and judge it as if it didn't have the South Park license, I'd honestly call it pretty average. The combat is fun, but it's a little one note. Now, Stick of Truth's combat was kinda one note too, but it was faster paced there and moves were more fun to pull off. And as for the other faults of the game, there's performance issues, there's bugs, exploration could have been more interesting, and there's just not nearly as much novelty factor in this South Park sequel thanks to the setting being the same. But the South Park license saves it, and if you're a fan of the show, I definitely recommend playing this. In fact, this South Park front pushes my score to a high 7. And if the various bugs and performance issues ever get fixed, then that's an A. It's a really fun time, but be sure to play this game for South Park, not for the RPG. Now, it's not a bad RPG, it's just average. And if you want a great role-playing experience, there's definitely better games out there. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, and now to end this review about as abruptly as the game did.